Hey friends, welcome to another edition of the Tennis and Bagels Podcast. This is me, your host Vansh, and today I'm joined by the host of the On the Line podcast. It is the one and only Jack Edward. How are you doing, my friend Jack?
Good. Very well, thank you, Vansh. Great to see you. It's been a while. It's been a couple of weeks since we last spoke to each other, so keen to catch up with you. And it's been a great week of tennis, actually, so I'm very keen to break it down.
Great, let's dive into it. Yeah, I'm always excited to hear what you have to say. But we can start with Stuttgart. Obviously, it's loaded field there, like it is for most of the WTA 500s, and 9 of the top 10 were playing. Really, the question mark for me was, where does Iga Swiatek stand really in the pecking order coming into this week? Because, obviously she's coming back from injury, hadn't played in over a month. There were a lot of question marks, particularly her against the bigger hitters on a hard court. And so this was a great week for her to sort of reassert her dominance on clay and really separate herself from the field like she did once again, because I thought Sabalenka actually played a pretty decent match. For the most part, there was not much in it. One break in both sets. And the last time these two played was at the WTA finals, where obviously Sabalenka was able to get the win. But in this match, Iga only faced one break point the entire match. And that was in the second set, when she already had a break. And the break point, the point that she plays, just set up break point in the first set. Absolutely amazing stuff. Chases down this overhead smash, gets back into the point, and just dictates from there. It was such a phenomenal demonstration of what makes Iga Swiatek so good. But what did you think of the final overall, the level from both players?
Yeah, that point in particular, fantastic defense. I almost wasn't surprised when Sabalenka netted the overhead. Just the speed that Iga was moving around the court was phenomenal. That was one of the best performances I've seen from Iga this year, if not the best performance. Because I thought Sabalenka was fine. There wasn't too much wrong with her game. Maybe a couple of errors you can point to on the serve on big points. But overall, she was hitting the ball just as well as she was against any other opponent. It's just the way that Iga's able to cover her forehand or defend her forehand better than she could on hard courts earlier in the season. There's just no rush in that side when you play on clay. It comes back heavier, it comes back deeper, it comes back weightier. And the way she moved, of course, it's second nature to her on the surface, and she makes it look so easy. The way she can slide out to return serves that other opponents wouldn't have got a racket to, easily just getting them deep every single time. I was in love with Iga's game in that match, and it bodes so well for the French Open. So I think we all want to see peak Iga for the French, and if somebody can get close to her, great. But the way she played there, I'm struggling to think of a second best competitor over Sabalenka on clay. Yes, Stuttgart might have boosted her serve a little bit compared to the French, but the weight of shot she has nowadays, we were talking about that with her biomechanics trainer, Gavin McMillan. The weight of shot she puts on her forehand in particular is better than she used to have on that side, and it should make her a stronger competitor on clay going forward. So if Sabalenka could tweak a couple of things, you're going to get a blockbuster match if Iga and Aryna do play the French Open. That's the exciting part for me.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about the movement, because to me that's where Iga separates herself even from Sabalenka. Rybakina, I think, is not quite there yet on clay. I'd like to see, I know she beats Aryna, and she obviously has won a title. She has some pedigree, and her quick strike tennis work better, but for the most part I've seen it work very well on grass and hard courts. I'll be interested to see how, when she's healthy, because she had to pull up injured here in this tournament, if we can get a match between Iga and Rybakina as well, and we can sort of see where they're at. But I agree with you about Sabalenka. I'm struggling to come up with a number 2 as well. I would think I'd be excited to see Krejcikova against Swiatek, because I'd have also wanted to see Jabeur, but unfortunately Jabeur is not healthy. She's pulled out of Madrid with that calf injury, and that was a bit sad, because she'd just come from a really good round of form, particularly when he helps, and then it really kind of has the game and a few tools that could maybe disrupt Iga a little bit. But you're right about Iga's. To me, it's like her superior footwork, the little steps that she takes to get around the ball, the sliding, the balance that she's able to maintain, on the stretch, and she's able to just get around the ball as well. And she doesn't need to run around her backhand, because her backhand is absolutely amazing. It is. The technique on it is awesome, and I particularly find it a very pleasing stroke to watch to the eye as well, because there's very simple motion. There's not a big take back. It bloods pace very well. She's able to just get down on the ball as well as hit it on the rise. It's such a good shot, and she did such a good job of just giving herself time, both on the forehand and on the backhand, and just rushing Sabalenka really into shots that she might not want to go for. And and for the most part, Sabalenka actually played very well. That was kind of my main takeaway, because the whole week, Sabalenka was just destroying good players. She, particularly Krejcikova and Potapova.
3-2, right? And then 2-1 against Potapova.
And now she's really figured out Krejcikova, because, when they played in Miami and now here, it was fairly the same scoreline. So,
yeah, the Miami match was insane, to be fair. It was a different story in Stuttgart. It wasn't quite the same serving performance as Miami, but still just dominating that matchup when maybe she found it a little bit tougher in the past. The closing note I'd have on Iga, by the way, talking about footwork and stuff and her ability to give herself time. If you ever need a clinic on how to mop up short balls, watch Iga Swiatek. Because I'd love to know how many times she lost the point moving past the service line, because she is immense from there. She is immense. It doesn't matter where you get the ball, low-ter, backhand, high on the forehand, whatever. She will do just enough to make it incredibly uncomfortable for the opponent. I honestly think she is the best in the world at the moment at being clinical on those short balls. Her net play, obviously, is a little to be desired, but on the first strike, amazing. So good.
Yeah, amazing. And she has a very extreme grip on the forehand, right? It's sort of a Western grip that, might prone itself to being a bit rushed, particularly on the fast surfaces, but she just rips it. And she's able to rip it because of her awesome footwork. She's able to set up those little steps and then just, absolutely pummel every single forehand with a certain heaviness to it. And it feels like every single ground stroke has a purpose. When she plays on clay, it's just, there's just some players who are naturally suited to that surface. Think Rafa, think Casper Ruud, for example. And that really just,
How one hot take has just come to mind, actually. There is a small chance that Stuttgart actually might have benefited Swiatek a little on serve. So the first serves to the body came through quick. They didn't allow Sabalenka to get on the front foot on return, where she might have been able to on a slower surface. And that's how people have been beating Iga a lot of the time, right? They rush the forehand off the first ball because they've had time to set up their returns. Obviously you could point to the second serve, but to be fair, on clay, it is very hard to read. The first serve has been attackable in the past as well, though. We saw that with Garcia last year, right, in Poland. So maybe there's a few gaps still there, and we're yet to see that on a true clay surface, if that makes sense. I'm probably being harsh, so the rest of her game was great, Vanch, but it's 1 point I will be watching out for when we go forward.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I think her serve gets sometimes neutralized on the faster courts. But on a court like Stuttgart, where it's fast, but she has clay underneath her, you feel like it's that much harder to rush her on the first shot. And her second serve effectiveness, people remark a lot about that, but I think for me, it's in one of those matches, it was also her first serve not doing enough, forcing her to hit more second serves, and she was winning about the same number of points on her first serve as she was on her second serve, and you don't want that. You want there to be a much bigger gap. Particularly, I think in the Rybakina match, she won 57% of points on first serve and on second serve. Second serve number's great, but first serve, no, you got to be doing. Rybakina was at like 80%, and that's kind of what flipped the match. And Swiatek, there was one match that she played this week. Pliskova came out absolutely guns blazing and was up double break in the first set and managed to win the first set. But you could just tell. The heaviness of Swiatek's ball once it just clicked into gear, it was too much for a first strike linear power player like Pliskova. And so, but yeah, and another takeaway for me for Stuttgart, just before we move on, was Paula Badosa. As Paula Badosa has now been playing some very good matches and close. Her level is really starting to get much better. Hasn't lost to a player ranked outside the top 13 this year. And her last two losses, because her draws have been very difficult. She's fallen off. She's around 30 in the world, but if she beats one of these seeded players and gets back in the mix, she's gonna be back in the top 10, I think, because I just think the confidence is back. She's playing a lot better. She couldn't close out those matches, particularly this week, 6-4, 4-2 up against Sabalenka, but I think played very well for the most part, even in the third set when she lost the second. And then those 2 losses against Rybakina, extremely tight, Indian Wells and Miami. So very encouraged about her going forward in this clay season. And she has pretty much nothing to defend until San Jose, I think, where she made the semis. So
yeah,
it's
fair point match.
Yeah, absolutely. And then of course, so Krejcikova and Badosa, I kind of look at. We gotta see where they're going to be ranked at the French Open, because they could be real threats. But
yeah, I mean, Badosa will likely, she'll make a seeding, right? So she won't be a total dark horse. But you're right. I think people underrate Badosa. The weight of her ball is incredibly difficult to get back if you can't generate your own pace. Could see a quarterfinals run for, or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, that would do well for her confidence, and I could see that pushing her much forward in the second half of the year, where particularly last year it was not what she would have won. But I think that sort of about does it on Stuttgart. I think we can move on to the men's side and talk about Barcelona, where that also felt very much, if you had asked me before the tournament, is there anyone who's going to win besides Alcaraz? Potentially Tsitsipas if things fall his way. Maybe Jannik Sinner and Casper Ruud. And we sort of ended up getting pretty much mostly the players we would have wanted in the second half of the tournament. And I think 15 of the 16 seeds made the 4th round. So it was a good showing for a lot of the top players. But Alcaraz, once again, really showing he's a step above the rest of this field. And at this moment, right now, Jack, I make him the favorite for Roland Garros. Just given the doubts surrounding Djokovic and Nadal, I don't think there's much evidence for any other player to be the favorite right now. What say you?
I think I'd agree with that, Vanch, particularly after the Tsitsipas demolishing. It's not just exclusive to Tsitsipas, that sort of insane play. That would work against pretty much anybody. I think onto maybe bar Novak and Rafa. You still have a few question marks, but you've got to make them the heavy favourite against anybody on tour playing like that, right? I mean, it was insanely good, particularly how, again, I always talk about this with Alcaraz. For me, I'm always so impressed with his awareness of what shot to play when. He just knows. He has like a sixth sense about it. He knows when Tsitsipas is going to jump back. Drop shot time, I mean, the amount of time he gives himself to change the grip from forehand grip to drop shot grip, chopper grip, whatever, is maddening. I really wish I could do that. It's an amazing skill. But anyway, my point is his awareness, and this is perfect for court craft on a clay court, is next level. And it's better than anybody else for me right now, at the moment, I think. Because he just knew when to play the right shots. 3 and 4 was honestly quite kind to Tsitsipas in the end. It was an absolute clinic, Vanch. And I'd agree with you on the favourite for Roland Garros.
Yeah, completely. I mean, anybody who watched that match would just be, and more or less him the whole week, but really the last 2 matches against Evans and Tsitsipas, where he was just toying with his opponents. I mean, against Tsitsipas, we talked about it before we started recording, but 10 plus winners on the drop shot on both the forehand and the backhand. And it was just mind blowing. And it's the way that he, plasters you behind the baseline, and then you're just left absolutely squandered with a shorter ball in the middle of the court. Tsitsipas talked about this in his post-match press conference, that he absolutely needs to hit it a lot deeper. He recognized that, but he knows it's extremely difficult because of how far back he's pushed back, particularly in the back-end corner where he's just locked in. And we know he gives up a massive chasm of ground, particularly to the forehand. And against most guys, his athleticism is elite enough that he can get right back into the point, and he can hit heavy enough. And a lot of people comment that his ball is pretty heavy on clay. Now when he's playing Alcaraz, then he gets totally outmatched, particularly on the serve +1, and also just in rally, you felt like there was no way through. The Tsitsipas was having to do way too much on his forehand, particularly to finish points or to get any sort of opening, get Alcaraz on the stretch. And even from there, he came out second best. And, he was up a break in the first set. And that was mostly due to Alcaraz playing a somewhat of a poor game, I would say.
Definitely, yeah.
And rather than, Tsitsipas really finding himself in the final, because really after that, it was pretty one-way traffic, I would say. And it's kind of notable as we talk about Alcaraz coming up that, he's now won 3 finals against Medvedev, Tsitsipas, and Zverev, and he's barely lost games against these 3 guys. Okay, you could say different conditions. We could say, okay, maybe Tsitsipas is not at his very best yet. Potentially coming back from the elbow stuff. it wasn't Miami, maybe, but maybe he would have made it a little closer had he had Tsitsipas of, let's say, 2021 showed up. But I highly doubt he would have won either way. And then, you have this Zverev match in Madrid where he absolutely took him apart with drop shots. And then you have the Medvedev match, albeit in conditions where, Medvedev, you would expect Medvedev to come on the losing side, of course. But nonetheless, these score lines are really something, aren't they?
They are, honestly, they're mad. One very quick sidebar, and I'm getting ahead of myself. We can get back on track very quickly. But Alcaraz's chances at Wimbledon, for me now, okay, there's a couple of things missing in the serve that I would like if he was going to be the outright favourite. Obviously, he's never going to be the outright favourite over Novak at this stage in his career. But for me, he's right up there, maybe second best, just because of his ability to get forward at the right times. He knows exactly when his opponent's changed his grip for a slice. He knows exactly when to do serving volleys. He's better at coming forward than anyone else in his generation, or, the previous generation, I guess. And for me, that can make a massive difference at Wimbledon. You win the majority of the points coming forward if you're a good mover. Statistically, anybody who's come forward at Wimbledon will win a pretty high percentage more points at the net than they would at the baseline if they're brave enough to come forward. It's just about the frequency of when they come forward, basically. But my point is, if you can come forward, you've got a pretty healthy amount of points to be won there, and that will make a difference when Alcaraz plays this year. He was still a little bit of an unfinished product last year. Didn't return so well. Remember that match against Sinner? But he still made the fourth round. I should see him going pretty far this year.
Yeah, and it's important to remember his preparations were cut short last year, of course, because, had to pull out of Queens, had a little bit of an elbow injury, was wearing a compression sleeve, kind of bit dodgy in the first round, got lucky to win against Struff, and then never really, Sinner was able to just rush him, and he didn't look as comfortable moving side to side, because obviously very different movement from the clay where, you're changing directions and you're sliding into shots versus on grass where it's, a little bit more of the lighter footwork, and it's, you have to be a little bit defter with the way you move. But I think Alcaraz is going to get that experience for sure this year, and he's going to be, there's so many things that work well in his, that, you'd love to see him on grass, because he loves to hit from a lower contact point, and the low bounce doesn't really bother him as much as it would for a lot of the other guys. He can obviously generate insane amount of pace from really any position, but particularly on his forehand, when he has to generate pace and then recognize when to come forward. I can see that working really well for him, especially even the serving. If he can get the body serve right and he can get those miles per hour up, he'll still have some easy +1s even on a grass court. So I think it'll be very interesting to see, because particularly the one thing the only thing that I'm concerned about for Alcaraz is those little niggles and injuries that he sustains in 2 or 3 week deep stretches into tournaments, where it's just a freak thing. A lot of the times it's like stretching for a second serve return, like it was against Sinner in Miami, and just kind of in that split second, hurting your body or doing something a bit frantic, and it's a very much in the moment reaction. And we know Alcaraz is going to chase down every single shot, because he's a human highlight reel, and he's going to get every single ball back that most humans on the planet can. And even if he can't get it, because he's only human at the end of the day, it's so fun.
But there was one against Tsitsipas, wasn't there, where the ball got put back into play with a Tsitsipas volley. Tsitsipas fist pumped. I mean, Alcaraz was like an inch away from getting it. He was very close to put it back into play.
Oh man, yeah. So he's going to run for a lot of those shots, and if he's down love 40 or he's up 40 love, maybe I would say, okay, maybe you don't need to chase that, but I don't want to mess with that psychology, because he, that's what makes him such a great player and electrifying, and you don't, I guess if he stopped running for those, maybe Damien pointed out, he'd be a less exciting player.
Yeah, but absolutely.
But nonetheless, like maybe that would be my only concern. Deep into Madrid, deep into Rome, let's see how he pulls up physically. But yeah, I'd love to see a match between him and Rune now. I think that's going to be very exciting, with Rune having defended his title, with them only having played basically once if you take out next gen finals in Paris Masters.
Yeah. And even then, that ends in a retirement.
Yes, it ends in a retirement. So, and because these two guys have something special, in terms of their complete package, let's say, their They're in terms of how they build points, and they're both highly explosive. So
I think it's the fact that both of them possess an insane ability to have it. They've got their all-court game for starters, so that's obviously going to be incredibly exciting. But the fact they defend so well, the two of them, I mean, Rune is an amazing defender, and I think we've only seen the tip of the iceberg in terms of what he can do in terms of movement and defense. Honestly, I think he could just keep getting better. It comes as second nature to him. So I think we'll see amazing rallies of amazing shot making from both players if they do play, which would be amazing.
yeah, absolutely. And of course, we transition into Munich, where Rune ends up defending his title, albeit a very, very dramatic final between him and Botic van de Zandschulp, repeat of last year. But really, the story of this match has to be Botic not getting the job done at the end, unfortunately. 5-2, 40-15 up in the third set. Served 43 times. 6-5, 40-15 up again, the third time. And just got extremely tight. It's, if you're a recreational player, you play at any sort of level, you're an amateur, you're a pro, you're playing ITFs, whatever it might be, we've all been there, we've all done that, we've all lost leads like that. And it's how you respond from those leads and how you pick yourself up. And this is going to be a really, really difficult loss for Botic, particularly because it was on his serve and he had done so well to get himself up to that point. Rune was struggling physically with his shoulder as well as his ankle. Some people were saying, maybe he exaggerated his shoulder injury and, he did it on purpose to take whatever your opinion is on that. The reality is, something was definitely bothering him. He wasn't moving as well as he was for the rest of the match. And he couldn't hit a forehand for a good 4 or 5 games. And Botic, when you're not thinking clearly, under pressure, he was directing most of the traffic to Rune's backhand. And that was not a good combination because Rune had so many options on his backhand. He could go with the down the line drop shot. He could just attack because Botic's forehands were sitting up middle of the court, right in Rune's strike zone, and he was spinning in for serves at, I want to say, generously at 80 miles per hour because...
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Raj, obviously there was something tactically going on. Firstly, you're right. It's so hard to pull him apart from that. Obviously, under pressure, you're going to be doing anything just to win the match. Secondly, he did get himself in a position to win the match, right? Yes. It was him. It was Botic that let that match go rather than Rune. Rune did the job of getting the ball back in play, asking the question enough times, and Botic did not respond well. It was grim to watch, and it is one of the toughest watches I've had of an ATP final in recent years because I was cringing. I really like Botic van de Zandschulp. I want him to win his first title, so that was very, very tough.
Yes, I found myself just rooting for him in that moment just because of how close he had come. And Rune played one spectacular championship point save, and that was with the backhand volley in the open court, and he set it up really nicely and recognized what to come forward, a bit like Alcaraz does a lot of the time. So that was, and then once it came down to the tiebreak, he was absolutely tough as nails. But, that would have been a very different narrative as well if had Rune lost that final.
Yeah, absolutely. He did, honestly, to be fair, he did a good. All credit to Rune, I've got to say, because he is mentally under pressure. He's a great player. It is looking like the one Achilles heel of his game does seem to be fitness and endurance, I guess. Because this has been 2 finals in a row where we've seen his body start to break down. Albeit over the course of 2 weeks, he's played like 11 odd matches or so it's pretty excusable, I guess. But I mean, if he wants to progress, if he wants to be playing and reaching the heights of, Novak and Rafa on this surface, then he's certainly got to up his game in that department for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Because when the physical side goes, your shot selection also goes, and you're having to play way out of your comfort zone, and it'll be interesting to watch, particularly best of 5. With Rune, how does he bounce back home, particularly long match? Because those question marks do still exist with the Acapulco cramping as well as fatigue at the end of Monte Carlo and this week. You're absolutely right.
Yes, that's why it's tough to put Rune right up there, because just in terms in isolation of the quality of match he can play, I would have to put him like top 2, I guess, just because I would put him second because Rafa and Novak have still got too many question marks over them. I am expecting Novak to come back actually, so I'll say third for Rune, But the fact that I don't know if he'll last the whole tournament really, really makes me feel doubtful. We didn't see him break down last year when he was arguably in less of a fit state. Right, he just lost to a better player on the day, and Rude. So yeah, I don't know. It's very tough, Vash. It's tough for me to back him, and it'll be very interesting to see if he can bring a performance for 2 weeks that gets him far at the tournament.
Yep, and with Madrid and Rome, we should get more data points, particularly with Rome, leading into the French. But yeah, I mean, and also a good win for Christopher O'Connell in that tournament as well, knocking out Zverev. He's particularly an exciting player to watch, just with his variety he brings to the court, and he's got really good court craft. Love his backhand, doing clay court, does a lot of damage, and
it kicks, man. It kicks. It is heavy.
Yeah, it's a really heavy shot, and he's a little bit old school as well. Likes to come forward, and yeah, he's a guy who really troubled Medvedev in the Rotterdam, Dubai, Doha stretch. Pushed him harder than any other player. So, to me, it wasn't a surprise that he pushed Zverev all the way, but it was a great effort for him to get the job done in the end, particularly on a court that Zverev really likes. So that was impressive to watch. And yeah, I mean that's about it for Munich. Going back to Barcelona, obviously had a great week for Musetti and our personal fan favorite, Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. We say that after having watched him live.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
To win 2 matches, pushed Alcaraz harder than anyone else in Barcelona. Had some chances in both sets, but it was very entertaining, and I had that one circled right before the draw came out, as soon as the draw came out, before the tournament started, I had that one circled as like, okay, potential ADF Alcaraz quarterfinal, and it didn't disappoint for the most part. So that was exciting.
Yeah, very excited to see if he can do anything in Rome. I'm not expecting much from Madrid, but who knows? He's an absolute gladiator on the surface. And his serve does carry a bit of pop in the decent case, as we learn it in the well as well. Maybe a few well-directed body serves could actually fare him well in a few of his matches. I do think Rome, though, is the place to watch him, where he could actually make a little bit of a run if the draw goes okay. I believe he would be outside of seedings. He will be outside of seedings, in fact, definitely. I'm thinking of 32 seeds. There are, of course, only 16 in Masters, so it would be tough for him to avoid a tough draw. But I'm never saying never, Vanch, after watching him live. I just, my hype for ADF is through the roof at the moment. So that Alcaraz performance was great. That totally makes me think he could do it. So yeah, I am holding my breath for an ADF deep run this Glacier.
Yeah, we'll see, because if he doesn't get himself seated, he's an absolute dark horse. And I don't think many players would want to face him on a slow clay court in general.
No, of course. Who did he lose to last year? Was it Zverev maybe, or I don't remember now. In the French.
That was a couple of years ago. Yeah, he beat Rude and
a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean last year I don't remember off the top of my head, but he really didn't do very well apart from Monte Carlo, and a 4th round run at the US Open. So he has a lot of points to gain. But yeah, it wasn't enough for him.
The Rude one comes to mind now. Sorry, a little sidebar, but I remember him underarm serving on match point against Rude, or maybe it was like Juice or something, but it was an absolutely audacious thing to do an underarm serve. Just more of the amazingness you can catch of ADF. Just, you don't know what's coming next. He plays stuff you'll never see him play. Go watch him live. As if I've said it enough now after watching him. Go watch him live if you get the opportunity.
Yes. And yeah, just looked it up. He lost to Talon Griekspoor in the first round after winning the first set. So
right, okay, not the best then.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, Barcelona, Munich, and then obviously we closed shop up in Bosnia.
Yes,
with all the Serbians, and particularly headlined with Djokovic, of course, going out in the quarterfinals to Dusan Lajovic, who ended up winning the whole thing. So full credit to him. He's another player who you watch him on a slow clay court, and you realize just the full repertoire that he has. I mean, he has such easy power on a slow clay court. He's able to generate it so easily, particularly his pick serve on the ad side, his forehand, his touch at the net, his when he really plays. I think a lot of the time for him it's about nerve management and his rating in the margins. And once he does that on clay, particularly slow clay, he's an absolute nightmare to play against.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's one of those players that's not going to have to go to the Tsitsipas single-handed backhand academy, as Sean Sebastian did.
Absolutely not. No, it's one of his best shots, and he's
Absolutely.
and particularly when he plays the big guys on clay, he really feels very confident because we remember the Monte Carlo run 2 years ago where he took out Team and then Medvedev, who was playing very well, and then he has a lot of big wins. I mentioned on Twitter he's beaten. Won his last match against Ruud, Rublev, Djokovic, Medvedev, Team. Like it's pretty much the only slam Del Potro, when he was very good in 2018. So pretty much the only players he hasn't beaten yet are Wawrinka, Nadal, and Alcaraz. If you're talking about just active, slam champions. So he has, quite the pedigree, I would say now. And having backed up the Djokovic result is not always easy because he was down against Kecmanovic as well in the semifinals. Kecmanovic match. And so for him to win that one, come back, and then the performance against Rublev, a little bit surprising that Rublev played this tournament, I must say. Not very surprising given what we know about Rublev, how much he loves to play every single week, but
loves a bit of rhythm.
But yeah, I mean Lajovic, he beat I think 3/4 of the entire Serbian Davis Cup team roster.
Yeah, I suppose he did, right? Was it Jera, Djokovic, and Kecmanovic? Is that right?
Yeah, Kecmanovic, Krajinovic, actually.
Oh yeah, Krajinovic, of course. Yeah. Somebody else played Jera that week.
He beat Jera actually in Rio, so he's got the full set. He's undefeated against Serbians this year.
The number one Serb in the country, right?
Yeah, but I think the story has to be Novak and his health coming out of this, because the elbow thing is a bit of a concern, because it's one thing to start out slow like he has done in the past 3 years and in both his home event as well as Monte Carlo, and then sort of pick up form in Madrid and really peak for Roland Garros. Rome, he's made the final 12 times, and Roland Garros, of course, he's won, twice since 2016. So for him, it's, the good thing is that he has a couple of weeks now before Rome, and Madrid is not really a place where he really thrives as much for the crowd support, I feel like, and it doesn't suit his game nearly as well at peak physical condition.
Yeah.
So I think it's all about the elbow, really, because it is just a little concerning because we know what happened 5 or 6 years ago.
I think it is. I saw Mark Petrie saying, no, if you're worried about Novak in the moment and then you've not been paying attention the past few seasons, as a rebuttal, I've been paying such close attention that I've looked at Madrid. He tends to peak for Madrid. He's rarely had, he gets to the semis or whatever, or at least plays a really good match like he played against Alcaraz last year. He tends to be playing pretty well by Madrid. So for him to pull out, a little concerning, I would say. But he obviously is pulling out with one thing in mind, and that is to peak for the French Open. So he probably does know what he's doing. He's not showing us, apart from a couple of injuries earlier in the year, that he is fragile, that he's likely to break down for a Grand Slam if he prepares well enough. So it's unlikely, it's unlikely he doesn't show up. So it's tough to rule him out. But I'm still a little concerned because it's not ages till the French Open bunch. If there is something really niggling at him, then it's going to be pretty tough for him to. I think it's going to be pretty tough for him to come back in time, and he'll want to be there for Rome, of course, fans, right?
Yes, and if Rome doesn't go as well and he doesn't get those matches in, because right now he's got 4 matches, he's 2-2, hasn't looked like himself in any of those 4 matches, to be quite honest. So if and we know a couple of years ago he skipped Madrid, he got to the final of Rome, lost to Rafa in 3 sets, and then won his Belgrade 2 event the week before the French Open. So it's not ideal to play the week before, but I don't know if you're Novak, maybe you have to do that. I'm not certain, but yeah,
it's unorthodox even for him, right? But if that's what does it, then fine. I still think the percentage chance of him showing up for the French Open is more in his favor than not in his favor. Definitely.
Yeah. And for Rafa, it's like 50-50, maybe even under 50. And for Novak, it's it's more like 75%. I think he'll show up.
Yeah, it's getting probably scary for Rafa.
Yeah.
I really don't know.
It hasn't been good. It really hasn't been good. All the stuff that I've heard about is, he was supposed to recover in 6 to 8 weeks after that injury against McDonald in the hip, and now he's on 14th week, and now he's getting another treatment. That's a bit scary.
Jeez, Yeah, it's unlikely, and isn't it? But you just never want to say never. Every single time I ruled out Rafa, like the Australian Open last year, and then the French last year with a foot injury after he lost to Chapo. I just, yeah, that's why I think you're being, some people might be saying you're being kind, going just under 50%, but it's Rafa. You never know. It's not looking great.
Because he's going to want to be close to 100% or 100% if he's playing that tournament, just because of the aura that he has there. Just, that's the one tournament, the most important tournament in his career. So, hopefully we get both Novak and Rafa in the field. But if not, I mean, Carlos is the favorite going in, and then it'll be very interesting to see who steps up from the rest of the field. Much like Iga on the women's side, although not quite as much.
Not quite as much, yeah, definitely. But you never know. I want Jannik to step up as well, but I mean, he pulled out of Barcelona this week. He pulled out of his Musetti match, and he's not.
He's not a bit as well but I think that it's an illness rather than an actual physical injury. So I expect him to be fully back by Rome, and it'll be interesting to see if we get Alcaraz versus Sinner in Rome, and we get Alcaraz versus Rune as a potential semi-final in Madrid. Yeah, that's one that I'm circling. Of course, a lot of work for both guys to get there, but
Alcaraz, Sinner, and Rome, that sounds like a dream. That's exactly what I want, but it's a while away, Vanch, but that would be fantastic. Be French.
Yeah, of course. So we got this whole 1 month of stretch now to look forward to, and thank you, Jack, for coming on and recapping the last week with me. A lot of great storylines heading into Paris.
Yeah, no worries, Vance. Thoroughly enjoyed it as always. Whenever you need me to step in, give me a shout. I'll be more than keen to get on.
Great, yeah. Thank you very much. And you can also follow us at Tennis and Bagels Official. You can follow Jack at on the line.
On the line _Jack on Twitter.
Jack on Twitter. Perfect. Yeah, and check him out on YouTube as well, and also for Talking Tennis, where we both contribute. So, thank you very much, and we'll see you all soon.